So for my latest video, I wanted to talk about my personal battle with agoraphobia. For those of you who might not be familiar with agoraphobia, it's a fear of situations and places that it can cause panic, helplessness, or embarrassment. So this is something that develops a lot of the time, and in my case, it developed as a result of having a number of panic attacks. And as those of you who have followed the channel know, that I wasn't properly treated for at least 6 years, but I went untreated for about 3 years. And so that was the breeding ground for me to develop agoraphobia. And some of the things that you end up being triggered by or incredibly afraid to do, paralyzed even, things such as driving. For me, as a lot of you know, my first panic attack happened while I was driving. So driving, public transportation, large open spaces, bridges, parking lots, beaches, and public places also, stores, markets, larger venues too, especially. And, the Greek word agora actually means market. So the original meaning was like fear of marketplace or fear of public places, but it's come to encompass fear of open spaces, fear of anything that triggers that panic, embarrassment, where you develop avoidance behaviors because of it. So yeah, I had multiple panic attacks, and the first one happened while I was driving 70 miles an hour in a car, and it lasted way longer than panic attacks are supposed to last. So I had a massive adrenaline dump, and for several days I felt extremely strange, really, really strange. Everything seemed surreal. I was exhausted. I got dizzy really easy. It was a really bad one. So from there, every time I got into a vehicle and started to drive, I could feel, as soon as I sat in the vehicle, these are fight or flight responses. So as soon as I got in the vehicle, my mind would remember, oh, this is where that dangerous, life-threatening thing happened. Of course, it wasn't a dangerous or life-threatening thing, but the biochemical response was the same as if I was being, chased by a bear or, on a battlefield of war. So that feeling is there right when you get in the vehicle. And that would trigger panic attacks. I had several panic attacks while I was driving. Also, as far as becoming agoraphobic, one thing I noticed shortly after I started having panic attacks, I used to like to go for bike rides and for walks. And I would notice that the further I got away from my house, the worse I felt, the dizzier I felt, the more unreal things looked. It was strange. I was trying to figure this out. And of course, I wasn't even considering the idea of, a panic attack or panic disorder. Instead, I'm thinking, this is some physiological thing. Maybe I have, I'm having a heart issue or something. But I would notice, because at the time I started having panic attacks, I was biking 10 miles a day, like 3 or 4 days a week. And I would notice after I started having panic attacks, I'd get, a short distance from my house and really not start to feel well. I noticed the same thing with walks. And then, you start not feeling well, and then all of a sudden it starts entering your mind, well, how about if I have a heart attack or something and I'm alone? And I don't know about you guys, but one of my fears, I'm man enough to say this, is dying alone. I don't think that is something any of us look forward to. And for whatever reason, that would be the thought that would come into my head because I was feeling so unwell. So this would get worse and worse. And at first, I was still trying to go for bike rides, but I would notice when I got a short distance away from my house that this wasn't going to work because I was having fight or flight response. I didn't know that's what I was having at the time, but that's what I was having. And the symptoms were terrible. So what you do in response to this, and this is how agoraphobia develops, guys, is you start doing avoidance behaviors. And that's what I started doing. And you'd be shocked at how quickly this happens. Like, it does take time. It doesn't happen overnight. But as soon as you start avoiding things that make you feel uncomfortable, in my case, driving, walking away from my house, not having a certain person with me when I went to public places. Initially, my safe person was my wife. Again, I wasn't thinking, oh, she's my safe person at that time, but that's what was happening. And what happens is your world gets smaller and smaller. You end up, avoiding, I started avoiding bike rides. Then I started avoiding walks. Then I'm having a hard time going to work. I don't want to drive, even short drives. I'm kind of just saying, asking my wife if she can drive. And, it's kind of insidious because, like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens incrementally. But then all of a sudden you realize your life went from being this, somewhat enriched, fulfilling life to all of a sudden just going outside feels uncomfortable. So, it's a horrible existence. Living with agoraphobia is a horrible existence. I remember just sitting on the couch and turning the lights off. Sometimes I'd watch TV or movies, but sometimes I couldn't because it seemed like there was the screen was moving. I mean, again, those of you who battle panic disorder or anxiety attacks, panic attacks, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a weird kind of dizziness that seems to be very prevalent for people who experience these anxiety spectrum disorders. And another strange thing about it that I noticed, and I haven't done enough reading on this one specifically, but I did notice that after the sun went down, my agoraphobia, for whatever reason, got less. Now, I do know that since I was a young boy, big open spaces would give me some fear. Like, you stand on the beach at the ocean, I've always been in awe of that, and even when I was young, sometimes that would affect me. Not to the point of, a panic attack or anything like that, but it would make me feel uncomfortable. And I've never been thrilled driving over bridges. But once this started happening, open spaces, even like when the seasons change, even when there's all the leaves falling off the tree and you can see much more wide open spaces, that would bother me when my agoraphobia was at its zenith. I couldn't do anything but very short drives. I always felt unwell. And then it got to the point where it came to a head where I was just sitting on the couch having panic attack after panic attack, because eventually there is no safe place. You're in your house, you're with your safe person, and it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter because the fear is not real, right? It's this malfunction in the way your body is and the way your brain is receiving these neurotransmitters that's making you think you're in a life or death situation. Your fight or flight is turned on all the time. So you're trying to look for safety when there is no danger. So you will never find safety if there's no danger. I mean, what's safe? Being on the sidewalk is dangerous, going to your job is dangerous, going to, yes, there's a measure of danger with everything, but it becomes a prison. Agoraphobia is a prison that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. So That's kind of how agoraphobia was for me. Now, as far as tips on how you guys can deal with this and how you can get better, if you are in that state, if you are basically almost housebound, first thing you're going to have to do is work up the courage to get treatment. And a good thing about, since, post-pandemic medicine is that you may not even have to leave your house to get treatment for a mental health condition like agoraphobia. You very well may be able to do this, through your computer. Whatever the case, get treatment. You may need pharmaceutical intervention. That's a possibility. It's a real possibility. But whatever the case, see a mental health professional. That's number one. Another thing, this is fight or flight. And something I wish, and I've stressed in a lot of my videos, I wished I'd known early on, is try not to react to your symptoms. Try not to react to your dizziness. Try not to react to your to panic attacks. Let them happen. Like I've said in my other videos, let yourself die. You feel like you're going to die. You are dying when you're having a panic attack. I've been there so many times, guys. Just let it happen. If you fight it, if you fight these things, or you obsess as to why am I dizzy? Why am I dizzy? Oh, and then all of a sudden you're catastrophizing. Is it a brain tumor? Is it some untreated medical condition? Thyroid? I mean, guys, I've been down the rabbit hole. My Google searches would, they're the stuff of legend. I probably could get a medical degree with all the research I've done on all of the possibilities as to what could be wrong physiologically, et cetera, and that's not the way to go. Let these things happen. Once you've had yourself physically checked, because I don't think anyone should ignore symptoms, right? Because the symptoms are physical. So get yourself checked out by your doctor. Once you do, and you're cleared, then you got to acknowledge it's mental health, and that's when you have to get treatment. And that's when it's so important to just let these symptoms happen, whatever they are. So in recovering from agoraphobia, learn not to fight your symptoms. Let them happen. And it's easier said than done. But once you start receiving treatment, you guys will understand how important this is and how it's a part of recovery. Another thing that's super important, and this is going to seem counterintuitive, especially if you're agoraphobic, but you need to expose yourself to your triggers. So what does that mean? Well, if you're triggered by being in public places, that doesn't mean going to a large stadium, with 50,000 people. But what that does mean is force yourself to get out in public. Initially, give yourself a way to be able to remove yourself quickly if things start going poorly or you feel like you're going to have a panic attack. But still, even if you start to feel like you're going to have one, wait before you leave. Even if you're going to leave, don't leave fast. Don't give in to the fight or flight fully. If you have to leave, if you go to the store and you're going to do the shopping, maybe it's supposed to take you 45 minutes and you have to leave after 10 minutes, that's okay. This is part of getting better. That's part of exposure therapy. And if you've become housebound, if you've become agoraphobic to that extent, everything is going to be a process. I know that it'd be nice to hear me say, take a pill, everything's better, life is normal. And for some people, it might be almost like that. And that's great if it is. But for me, recovery was not linear. I had to keep forcing myself to do things that made me uncomfortable. So, force yourself to go to the beach. Force yourself to drive over bridges. You guys have no idea. That was part of me getting better for a while. There was one ride in particular that I would do over a certain bridge to force myself to stretch out, to recover from anxiety, from agoraphobia and being in those situations. Agoraphobia, to me, the biggest thing that is in your mind that's triggering agoraphobia and that leads to agoraphobia is your desire for control. That's what it was for me. Any place where I knew I wasn't in control, closed access highway, crowded place, anytime I felt like I couldn't remove myself instantly from a situation and I wasn't fully in control, that would trigger those initial avoidance behaviors that eventually led me to be agoraphobic. Another part of getting better, as like I said, you need to do exposure therapy, but you also need to use the logical part of your mind. Now, most of us with these anxiety disorders, we're very intelligent, we're very creative people, but that can be your nemesis if you're using it for magical thinking. You want to use your logical mind. Think about, does it really make sense that I feel safe when I'm with this person, or when I'm in my house, but when I'm a mile down the road, I don't feel safe? Or when reason it out in your mind. Again, this is part of the recovery process. Once you start feeling better, once you've gotten treatment, you have to do this. You have to re-engage the logical portion of your mind, because you have been in that cycle of fight or flight, worry, panic, avoid, and it's a process to undo it. That's why, again, if you start having these symptoms, as soon as you're diagnosed, or as soon as it's affecting your life to the point where it's changing your life, you have to get help. Get help quickly. Don't wait around. Because the longer these things get ingrained, the longer these things go on, the more ingrained they get. And the harder they are to recover from. It takes work. It will take work. And then the other thing I always tell you guys, get sleep, quantity and quality. Also, exercise, at least 30 minutes, 3 times a week. What type of exercise isn't important. Just whatever you can do, whatever your fitness level is capable of. Make sure you get cleared by your doctor for whatever activity you want to engage in. And then eat in a balanced way. Don't self-medicate with food. Don't have food control you. Don't eat to try to patch the anxiety or try to patch the fear. It's a very short fix, and it has very terrible consequences. And that's why, from personal experience, I can tell you guys, I weighed over 350 pounds before. And that was the direct result of self-medicating with food. So, agoraphobia, it's a terrible, horrible thing to deal with, but you can get through it. I'm living proof. I was essentially housebound. The only place that I would force myself to go just enough to keep my job was my job. Everything else that I do and have enjoyed and done in my life, whether it's family, friends, or anything else, I avoided. And I want to save you guys that horrible existence if I can. So if you are currently agoraphobic, get treatment, get help, and work. Do those things I mentioned. It's going to take some work, but trust me, you can get through it. If you're recovering, congratulations, and just keep doing these things. Keep stretching out. Remember, there's no safe place. There's no safe people. You're your own safe place. And, and if you are related to somebody or in a relationship with somebody who's enduring agoraphobia, obviously try to be empathetic and understanding, but also use some of these tools that I mentioned. Encourage them to watch the channel. Use some of these tools. Encourage them to get treatment. And again, they will recover. You can recover from these things. It might not seem like it, especially when you're at rock bottom, but like I said, I was able to do it, and there's nothing special about me. I'm not a superhero, far from it. And if you put in the work, you get treatment, put in the work, trust the people you love, you'll be able to get recovered and get back to living a full, enjoyable life. So again, thank you guys so much for watching these videos and the engagement. I really appreciate it. If you know anybody going through this, or related or in a relationship with somebody who's going through any of these anxiety spectrum conditions, encourage them to watch the channel. And thank you so much. Until my next video, take care.